what's it called? There's some like epic little town where there's like a great surf community on Vancouver Island. Tofino, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much the only surfing you can do in BC. I'm sure there's surf up north, but you'd have to go up north Vancouver Island, and there are no roads that go up there that you want to drive on.
Cool. We'll take a plane.
Yeah. Like literally a seaplane is your best bet. Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stewart, and today I'm joined by Kathleen Egan. She's the founder and CEO over at Ecomedes, and we are going to talk product market fit. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I want to get into a lot of things, but I want to start with the name. There's a really good story there. Tell me about the history or the origin story of the name.
Yeah, so it's a riff on Archimedes, who is a Greek mathematician, and he pioneered lots of different math. But one of his most known things is the lever, which became a catapult. And he was actually in the latest Indiana Jones movie. So maybe more people are familiar with him now. Archimedes for the physical lever and Ecomedes for a sustainability lever. And what we're trying to do is take the demand signal that lots of different buyers of building products have, from high-tech companies like Google to banks like JP Morgan, who want to have more healthy, less impact on their building when they build buildings or do remodels. And that demand signal, when they look for materials that have less impact, helps the manufacturers improve the quality of their materials to meet that need. And then with more availability in the market, more buyers could now access sustainable building materials. So the sustainability is a broad term for us, and it covers everything from what you would expect, like carbon, energy, and water consumption, but also impact on humans. Human health. Toxins are really bad for humans. And if you're in a building that's built with toxins, there's off-gassing. And of course, the good folks who work in the factories that make the building products are highly exposed to it, the installers. It also includes waste, circularity, and there's a bunch of different frameworks on how to divvy up all those impacts, which is a complexity that we're seeking to make easier.
Interesting. I spent a short period in my life in the welding space selling welding equipment. And so I remember going into these places and coming out just breathing differently, because all the fumes and everything that was in there was wild. And most of the folks, they would spend their whole life in this factory.
An interesting component of, again, the broad term sustainability is labor. And there is still slave labor making building products on this planet. So how do you make your building product supply chain transparent enough? So it's a very broad term. Anything that's bad for ecosystems and humans, we'd like to remove, because we have a lot of people on the planet. It's growing every day, and they all spend most of their time in buildings.
Fair enough. So just before we get into the regularly scheduled programming, I'm super curious about who is it you're selling to? Is it, I don't imagine this is a consumer play where you're trying to sell to me, the homeowner.
Right. We have lots of free users that we don't monetize, but are individual homeowners. We focus from a monetization standpoint more on the commercial side of the industry. It's about $1 trillion a year market, commercial building products. So it includes everything in your room, from ceiling to floor, behind the walls, the electronics, the appliances, all of it. And there are a couple of frameworks that have been around for a long time, like LEED, LEED, and that's a building rating system that counts each material and how sustainable it is toward the credits to the building. So it's a very complex B2B transaction where manufacturers sell through distributors and reps. They sell into a project team who is hired by the building owner. And so we're trying to help all those people do this efficiently and not let the complexity of the data be a tax that prohibits them from moving forward. Most of our revenue comes from the sellers, the manufacturers, but we do work with a couple of very large buyers, such as the Department of Energy in the United States and the Government of Canada is one of our largest customers, because Canada has a framework to take all of the sustainability elements that they're putting into legislation and eat their own dog food and make their buildings sustainable too.
Very cool. I didn't realize the government of Canada was doing something quite like that. I live in Vancouver and everything is green here. The flag may as well be green. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious, where did the idea come from? Because I don't think this doesn't sound like something you're just walking along the street going, I wish these building materials were more sustainable. So
Yeah.
there's got to be a good story here.
Right. My business partner, Paul, he was a sustainability consultant working on buildings like banks and higher ed in the southeast part of the United States. And every time he did a project, he had to start a new Excel spreadsheet and start going and getting the data, calling manufacturers, hunting and pecking through their websites because each one's different, and assembling that data so that they could ultimately submit it to the US Green Building Council, who gives out the LEED emblems. And
Right.
so he started just building his own little database in Excel to reduce the rework. And that evolved into something more sophisticated. He had a few leading manufacturers as customers when I met him, and I joined him to help turn it into more of a repeatable SaaS product. And we're up to over 100 brands on the manufacturer side. Our database actually has 10,000 brands because we pull in data from all the brands, not just our customers, but our customers have grade A data and a bunch of features that helps their reps and their distributors go to market.
And so are you pulling in like the MSDS, material data safety sheets and kind of things like that, the specifications, that kind of stuff?
If a manufacturer wants us to, yes. For the manufacturers who aren't our customers, so the vast majority of the 10,000 brands are not yet customers. We're still early stage. But for those ones that are not customers, we pull in the certifications from about 100 different third-party certifiers. So if you're certifying a floor for off-gassing, you have a certain set of third-party certifications. If you're certifying a chair, it's different. Those are the key data sources. Once a manufacturer is a customer, we also take any additional first-party data that would include data sheets, BIM objects, anything they want to put out there. A lot of those elements they already have on their own websites, and then we complement their website with a sustainability specific deep dive that can not just display all the information, apples to apples, show the source, give a freshness date, right, full attribution, but then it can also perform the compliance logic. So does this product get me LEED credits? It depends on what kind of building it is and the zip code of the building and the location of the manufacturer who made the product. And so that has been the work of LEED consultants, which my business partner was one. Now it's automated. So it could take weeks to say, okay, I have a flooring schedule with, let's call it 20 or 30 different products, right? Different rooms, adhesives, the mat, et cetera. And a consultant will have to do that without Ecomedes. And it could take quite a while and it rings up a hefty bill. Our product does it instantaneously and puts it in the exact format the US Green Building Council needs. And so you just can go through it much faster.
I was trying to think through what's the revenue model? Like, how are you saving people money, making people more money? But if you're saving somebody from having to like manually put together all of those sheets, if you're listening and you're not familiar, it is an absolute ton of work, just digging through spec sheets and finding the right things. I have some baggage in the space, but we don't need to go into that today.
Well, that baggage is exactly what we're trying to replace. And so we track that in ROI. And when it comes into scaling, ROI becomes really important. Our goal is about 10x ROI for every client. And that's just on the time savings. Then there's also that's the aspirin, right? Make this tedious task less hard. Then there's the upside. Now my reps can respond much faster to an important client. And how does that faster cycle time accelerate deals and maybe grow the size of deals? That's harder to measure. But the time savings, we've gotten very good at measuring. And when we look at our ARR, which is roughly 2.5 million, we save about 28 million a year in time savings. So we're hitting that 10x and it's growing all the time.
You're just really killing the consultants and all their revenue.
Actually, consultants are one of our top 5 users. So the consultants are also using our tool, and I would imagine still billing the time it used to take them. So I think consultants are actually a big beneficiary. And we have a couple partnerships with consultants where they implement our software for their manufacturing customers. But a lot of times the consultants work for the property owner. And the owner saying, hey, I want LEED, or I want to know. Google is one who's really particular about the kind of chemicals that their engineers are breathing in, because these are highly intelligent people who are going to thrive in a healthy environment. Another hotspot is oncology. Imagine you're building a cancer treatment center, right? Do you want
Yeah,
to put
I shouldn't laugh at that, but yes, it's funny.
you want to put carcinogens into
Yeah.
the waiting room, right? I guess if you're completely revenue focused, you might think, "Hey, cure cancer, we give cancer," but
Yeah.
most of them are actually in it to make people healthier. So they don't want those chemicals. And there's a bunch of different ways to slay that beast. There's a list of
Yeah.
red list chemicals, and we vet for that with our partners who are doing that testing. But then there's a whole bunch of chemicals that haven't made it to the red list yet that are actually also really bad, depending on how deep you want to go. And that's the big challenge here, is every building is literally a snowflake, right? They're even in a franchise like Starbucks or hotels, no two buildings are exactly the same, because they're at different longitude and latitude, different code, different customers. So each building has its own priorities. And so we're trying to let that not be the reason to not become really sustainable.
I love it. And so you had this amazing resource in Paul who had been doing the work. What was your validation process like? Did you just say, hey, Paul's done this a million times, so this is what we're going to build? Did you go and look and find other consultants? What did that look like?
Yeah. In the beginning, we did rely heavily on his experience and his repeat pain from doing that. And LEED does evolve. There's actually LEED 5.0 is about to come out, but we've been on LEED 4.0 and 4.1 for 5 to 8 years, I think. Like, it doesn't change that much. So that part of the process hasn't changed, but other parts of the process are changing. So we do also seek validation, number one, from our customers. We work with 100 great brands. They're pretty vocal. When something's a pain in the butt, they tell us. And then we conduct our own research too, qualitative and quantitative research going out to market. And we have about 50,000 users per month across our platform. So we have aggregated databases like products.ecomedes.com. That's like our meta catalog. But then we also customize it for each customer. So somebody like Miller Knoll, who owns 8 brands, it's just their 8 brands. So their reps can give those links out without sending a database with competitive products that are in that database. Across that, we have a lot of folks. So we try features and can get a quick response because of the volume. And then we also survey through our tool. Less uptake on that, because some people just close the window, but nonetheless, we get a signal there. So we do try to have as many signals as possible, partially because there's so many stakeholders. This is the decision-making unit for a product is a complex, dynamic structure, different for every material, different for every building almost.
And talk to me about like that decision to say, hey, we're going to build this into software. Before you built anything, did you go and talk to anybody, or was it just the two of you saying, hey, we're going to automate this?
So Paul started this for a couple of years without me. So he did some of the early digging on it. And one of the customers that he originally, that thought was, it's for people like him, the building owners who are trying to assemble all this data. And when we went out to the market to say, hey, manufacturers, right, I just want to aggregate this data to build a database to make it easy for the architects, what we found very quickly was that the manufacturers themselves did not have this data in a well-organized, easy-to-access fashion. And you'd think it's their products. How could they not?
Binders. Like,
that's or PDFs or Excel spreadsheets. And the certifiers are constantly recertifying. So it's pretty dynamic. And yes, the product assortment changes, but drywall, flooring, furnishing, the products themselves don't change that much, whereas the certifications are very dynamic. And the third parties throw this big curveball in the program, which is they often assign their own numbers. So we're not dealing with something that has like a stock keeping unit or a UPC like consumer packaged goods have, right? Everybody can identify the same tube of toothpaste with the same number. Our products, like the chair I'm sitting in here, it is called something different by each certifier that tests the chair. So they assign it like chair comes in, this is my 5th chair of the day, I'm going to call it chair 5, right? So that testing, and it also could include multiple chairs with different colorways, different bases. So it can be a collection, or it might be below the stock keeping unit where this color has a different dye So I have to test these two products separately. So
Right.
the managing of that information into a single record that gives you a comprehensive view is pretty involved. And that is part of our secret sauce, so that as the architect, you don't have to deal with it at all. You can look it up in one place. And if you want to get into the source documents, they're all indexed and put there. But where we've been moving is actually away from the detail and trying to roll it up more, because we have this early adopter segment, which my co-founder Paul was one of them, but they're a very small part of the market. I call them PhDs in material sustainability, and they are deep in it, but there's a couple hundred of them in the country, not a great market. So we're now going into that next early adopter and majority market, and they don't speak the hieroglyphics of building product toxicity and sustainability. And right. So it has to be in the language of English. And that's where we're moving, is to make this ever more accessible to a larger group of people.
I love that. I can just, there's so much that you can do if you have all of that data underneath it, in terms of like calculating, in terms of automating and making the reporting easy, in terms of making the scoring. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah,
I'm getting distracted.
We try to stay away from scoring, only because there are so many frameworks that already score the products. Like LEED scores it, how many credits it gets. Living Building Future scores it on a pedal system. Common Material Framework by Mindful Materials is gaining a lot of traction, and they score it in 5 buckets and factors and subfactors. So we don't need another scoring methodology. We need an easy way to put the data into whatever format that building owner and their architect and designer care about.
Totally. This is my cumulative LEED score from all of these different things. You just use the data.
Across multiple vendors, multiple CSI divisions, et cetera.
Love it. So I know, so when you came along, how far along was Paul in terms of like from a number of customers perspective?
He had a handful of customers. He had one customer on the buyer side, which was the US federal government, and 3 or 4 manufacturers.
Okay. And so where did those customers come from?
People he knew, personal relationships, and folks he reached out to say, I'm building this aggregated database because the US government wants to buy green materials. Do you want your data in it? Of course, they'd love to, great customer. And then he'd say, okay, send me the data. And they couldn't. And he swooped to help them on a almost consulting basis to help them get the data out. And it said, it turns out these guys aren't unique. Every manufacturer has this challenge with their own data.
What a great problem to run into, is you think you're solving a problem for yourself and you find a much more lucrative problem just sitting right there.
Yeah. And our dream and vision is the network effects, right? So if the folks who are buying and specifying the products have this at their disposal, and they have values on their website about waste, sustainability, carbon, what have you, and they'd like to reflect those values, there's a whole really interesting movement around sustainable procurement, which is more the building's now built and it's been remodeled and you're in operations and maintenance mode. So it's the cleaners and light bulbs and laptops for new people who start. And so you're buying, your spend is a big lever, but reflecting the values in that spend has been hard because of the lack of data availability. So we're trying to unlock that in every phase of a building, from the original ground up construction, remodel, tenant improvement, all the way through to operations and maintenance.
Cool. I love it. After this show, remind me, I've got somebody I want to ask a question about. Okay. So first customers came from Paul's network, then you got involved and you got this handful. Was your first insight, hey, let's just go after these manufacturers? Like, talk to me about where the next customers, because I'm always curious, like most founders, early customers come from that network. The people that you reach out to, you interview people, especially if you're a practitioner in the space. I'm super curious about where the next ones came from.
Yeah, we've tried a lot of things that worked and a lot of things that didn't work. We've probably tried it all. What we have found over the years is that, it's going to sound obvious, but the people with the most acute problem are the fastest to close and respond, right? So,
yeah. Wow. So, never heard before. I love it. Yeah.
So being much, much more targeted and using our own data, because we have all those brands, 10,000 brands in our tool. And so we were doing a lot of marketing that was a bit broad and awareness based. And now we're very tight. So out of the 10,000 brands, we know which 1,000 have the biggest problem, which 500, all the way down to like the top 20 who aren't yet customers, based on what we call a pain index, right? So their pain index is basically how many complex products they have, how many different elements of sustainability and third-party data are they trying to manage? That's a product. And then the whole thing gets raised to the power of how complex their go-to-market is. And it's usually at least a 3-tier distribution network with a dealer or a distributor or installer. Many times they have outside reps. They usually have one rep selling to the architect, one rep selling to the owner, and they're trying to like sandwich it in that way. So the more complexity in that go-to-market, and a lot of them were relying on some internal amazing person who was like the Paul at each of the manufacturers. Sometimes we call her Becky. There's a wonderful woman, Becky, who is this guru at Herman Miller. And she just had a queue of questions that never stopped, coming from reps trying to answer questions, customers calling directly, architects and designers looking for data. They send her these massive spreadsheets like, hey, fill in this spreadsheet for my project. And so she's got to go pick through each product catalog and fill it in. Yeah. And
poor Becky. That sucks.
Becky's life. Yeah. She was actually our power user of the year last year, because she not only empowered herself to do this better, faster, stronger, she now pushes it out to the team and says, you can go to this website. And that does a lot of great things. Now it gives the manufacturers tracking, because they could see which projects, which people, who are looking at my products, and what kind of sustainability do I really need? Cradle to cradle certification on every single product? Or is that only being sought after in seeding? And on my credenzas, I could save the money and put it into something else. So there's a lot of different demand signals that come once you have attribution. And most of the websites for these manufacturers, like, they're not into e-commerce yet, right? They've got reps.
No.
Their websites are loaded with data, videos, the story of the Aeron chair, et cetera. They've got beach plastic, recycled beach plastic in the base of one, like, here's the river it came from. So it's really rich storytelling. But if you want to know the lead credits, you had to go talk to Becky. Now Becky has a digital tool that can go out there and scale infinitely broader and track everything. So they get leads, they get digital customer engagement, they get demand signals on product level and a product attribute level, and they even get projects. So an example, JP Morgan's building a big building in New York. It's going to be the greenest building in New York. It's every certification. And across our whole network, we've got over 85 projects that somebody on the JP Morgan project, the GC, the designer, the architect, put products together to evaluate them. And so now the manufacturer gets to see that. And they didn't used to even see it because their dealer was the one dealing with the JP Morgan project team. So the more we grow, the more access the manufacturers get to that kind of richness, which if you work in e-commerce, you think, isn't it obvious? Don't they just get that from their website? But they don't, because the reps are out there with samples and donuts and trying to get into the architect's office, and they don't track that. Even the trade shows, they love trade shows, getting the hands-on product and building relationships, even with the scanner and the badge. Like, think about how much you pay at a trade show to scan a bunch of badges, constantly scanning everyone's badge who comes to their eco portal now. And that is rich information that could be used throughout the organization.
That's incredible. Yeah. Have you ever seen the tool, Let Me Google That For You? It's where somebody asks you a dumb question and you go to Let Me Google That For You. And then you type in the query that they could have typed into Google, and then you send them, it gives you a link, and they click on this link and it shows the computer typing in the query into Google for you. And then it hits enter and it's like, here's the search page. You need to do that for Becky.
But she could push it out to her team. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Let me Ecomedes this for you. Describe the moment that you realized you had product market fit.
I think it's ongoing, right? I feel where we are at in product market fit is good fit with the early adopters. Now we're trying to get into a majority with good product market fit. But in that early segment, a couple signals. One of them was with one of our larger clients, we're always trying to get them not to just call Becky, but to use the tool themselves. And we released what was a pretty minor feature, but the reps picked up on it. And all of a sudden the usage went like that. right? And so now we weren't going and saying, let's train the reps, let's educate them, let's bring this to them. They were coming to it. And so then it's like, okay, this isn't just sustainability. This is about commerce. And it is materially affecting how their deals happen, because reps, they're not going to use it for their health. They're only going to use the tool if it helps them sell chairs, sell drywall, sell electronics. That was one great moment. Another was, we have an electronics customer, Hewlett Packard, and we did this for their US division. And it was mostly for a customer support team who was like a big version of Becky, answering questions for the field. And we hadn't really trained outside of that team. So we had about 35 highly dedicated users. Yeah. When we went international, we started getting the reps from these other countries that maybe didn't have the same kind of customer support. And again, that showed like 3x growth very rapidly by just adding the international component. So when we've seen some kind of nonlinear growth in usage, that is when we say, okay, this has got legs. We're not having to bring it to people and keep reminding them. It's like they're seeking it out.
I love that. What comes next? You've got some fairly significant revenue. It sounds like there's definitely a proof point of there's something here. What do you see coming next?
We get a bit of a curveball, right, from the current administration and our country's view on sustainability and the importance of it. So we are in the process of digesting that. And because sustainability is so multifaceted, one thing we're looking into more deeply, for example, is Made in America. And no offense to Canada, because we have a lot of great customers who make products in Canada too. And the Canadian government will be looking more for Made in Canada, but that local aspect of it. And what we have seen, I don't have a hard data point on it, but products that come from overseas, and I would consider you guys overseas because it's the same continent, but overseas from Asia typically have much less transparency, right? So if you want to have transparency on toxins, water, whatever it is, the product that's from here usually has more of that. So instead of carbon or whatever was growing rapidly, and embodied carbon was growing rapidly under Biden, now it might shift more to local, Made in America. So adjusting to that is one piece of what's next. On the sales and scalability front, we're constantly testing and learning. We have no marketing department because we're a really small team, and we're actually driving to cash flow break even this year. And become masters of our own domain, so to speak. So we're trying to do everything as frugally as possible, but testing some AI outbound marketing and learning engines who could really focus on that small, valuable account list through LinkedIn, through email, through the usual suspects, but try to rely on intelligent agents instead of having to hire a bunch of marketing people. And some have worked better than others, and the ones that didn't work, we put it in the lessons learned and do the retro on it and then move on to the next one. So that we see as a big area, as well as using AI ourselves. Yeah. We did, you mentioned you must have really interesting ways to display the data. One thing that we do for our customers who want to is just take all the data we have on a product and use AI to write a sustainable product summary, because their marketing team hand writes a product summary, but it talks about all the dimensions of a product and sometimes barely mentions sustainability, or it just says it's sustainable, which is very vague.
Thank you for being specific. Right. Like, I'm reading the spec for the details, and you're like, do you want the details? And then you write the word details, and you're like, that's not helpful at all. Thank you so much.
As my son says, spell it, IT.
Yeah.
So it writes an AI-generated sustainability summary that can now use and plug into proposals when they need it. So that was get our feet wet, see how it works. We've leveraged a lot of AI on the data ingestion part, reducing some of our cost and time, 6x, accelerating the speed. And where we're headed next is you've got this multiplayer situation. Up until now, our user experience was really individual. I'm getting products, evaluating them, and then I could put it into a PDF and share that in email because that's how people still were working. But we're starting to see the need and build a more collaborative experience so that you could have multiple people looking at the same project as it changes over time. And usually the most sustainable of building ever is when it's still a watercolor painting. Reality
Yeah.
sets in. And so we'd like to be able to track that throughout the life cycle
Cool.
with visibility to everybody to collaborate on it. And then after that, just like we could turn part of Becky's less fun part of her job into an agent, right? We'd like that to become natural language interface. Because even though we've converted it step one into English, it's not all the way there. So to use an agentic interface is turn that into a more of a conversation. And then once that agent is working well for that role, you could imagine an agent for the architect who has different needs than the designer. And then the agents can all work together so that the team members can stop having to deal with admin and data and aggregation and reconciliation and do like the thing that their job is supposed to do, which is design a beautiful building, design beautiful interiors. If you're the GC, it's to aggregate this all up and to serve the client, get them back to the fun part of their jobs.
Totally. Give me an agent where the salesperson could say, does this qualify? I need this to be lead 4. And the agent goes, yeah, thumbs up. And you're like, cool. That's all I needed to know. Like, write me the description that goes in this proposal. Here's the proposal. And there it is.
Here's the proposal. Fill it out. And then it would come back and say, hey, we were able to fill out 85% of it. Do you want to fill out the other 15 or is it good to go? Another area would be for the reps. Have any of my customers been looking at sustainability, right? Today it's a report. They got a filter, like the data's there, but reps don't have the patience versus just saying, hey, did Google look at any of my products this week? Or did anybody in New York look at my products this week? So just make it easier and easier to access through that natural language interface.
Love it. If we could detour a bit on the testing, the AI outbound stuff, I've spent a bunch of time with it. I'd love if we could just spend a couple minutes there.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of agents are really good at writing. LLMs are really amazing at writing. LLMs are not amazing at, I would say, looking at a big database and saying, who are the best potential customers? Especially if you say, make this decision for me. And so I'm a big fan of like using AI to personalize kind of the part of the initial touch within a fairly strict framework. But where I see AI engagements go off the rails is when you say, hey, AI, make these decisions for me.
Yeah.
And I found the best thing you can do is to use AI alongside of the sort of traditional tools to give yourself the ability to target accounts that you wouldn't have. So like I actually wrote down in the show notes here, I'm like, hey, here's a play you could run is you said you want to sell to companies that value sustainability or sustainable procurement. You could go use a tool like Clay and then go get a list of all the manufacturers that you have in your database and then go see if any of them mention sustainability or sustainable procurement, or go grab their public reports or go grab their sustainability reports. And something like that, you're using AI to give yourself, to create a new lever.
That would be really interesting. Today we get back a list and that list is a mixture, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that the AI hasn't been good at yet is telling, is this manufacturer residential or commercial, right? Because the product's the same. Am I selling plumbing products? Because most brands sell both to some degree, right? So do they have a big business selling to commercial or are they primarily residential with a few commercial thrown in? And our target would be the ones that are primarily commercial or they're big in the commercial part is still a big business. And that is something we're still doing manually. How much do they care about sustainability? We have some metrics in our database about how many products and how many certifications, and we use that to put our targeting list out there. But then when the leads come in, we have to cross-reference it. I'd like that to be neater. And then the last element is the people. These are big companies with matrix organizations. And so you could look up on LinkedIn and see who they are, but I would like the AI to do that and score the person. It's saving us a ton of time and things like take this email list and look up their company, look up their website, tell me what kind of company it is, give me all the ones that you're 90% certain are a manufacturer, and it goes great up to there. And then is it commercial or residential? Not yet getting that. So it is a human who has to come in and do that. But now I'm starting with a pretty high hit rate versus just the world.
I suspect you could automate all of that, but here's the problem with like a lot of AI outbound systems is they say, give me a list of your best customers. And then it goes and uses like nearest neighbor or a bunch of different algorithms to say, okay, let's build a lookalike audience.
Yeah.
And these lookalike audiences, in my opinion, a bit of a crapshoot because you don't know what variables went into scoring this. Like, how much data do you have? Do you know, as an AI agent or as the AI system and however it's designed, do you know that I only care about residential versus commercial? That they have to care about sustainability? Or are you just going to go and look at this company and say, okay, these companies match this profile. Here's a generic profile based on what's available in,
they're both in Grand Rapids, Michigan or something.
Totally. They both are a manufacturer. So you get a bunch of other manufacturers and you're like, that's kind of garbage. And this isn't a fault of AI. It's not a fault of that AI can't do it. I'm sure eventually we'll get to the point where AI can do it, but it's just the level of complexity that you need to have a really well targeted AI driven campaign. You can't just say, okay, go and find all these creative little ideas in a generic AI database or tool. And that's my biggest problem with a lot of these tools. They say, oh, we can do all this stuff. And then you imagine AI doing this, and it doesn't do any of that. And
Right.
if you are an AI company and you are doing this, come email me and I will change my opinion. I'll update this video and I'll post I'm an
Right.
idiot. But
it's still work. And except for your work starts a little bit further down the funnel and with a little bit richer content, but you still got to pick it up there. You still got to prospect. We do have a partner who's doing prospecting on our best leads. And we were doing that not that long ago, writing our own HubSpot sequences and trying to optimize that, like without a marketing team. That was really painful. So I do feel like each little pain point is slowly getting replaced with great tools. And some of it is just popping into ChatGPT and doing it yourself. And we used to have an assistant looking up things and doing the enrichment. Now we just send it through ChatGPT and enriches it like that with a very high accuracy.
Yeah.
But we're always trying to push the envelope of it. One of the tools is actually doing LinkedIn, right? So it's looking at the target list of manufacturers we know who have some pain, some meaningful pain index, and reaching out to folks. Usually it's right company, wrong person, right? But good network expansion and exposure would be really great if it's right company, right person. But the titles are nuts. Like the titles vary very widely on who we're trying to target. So that's the next step, the next learning point.
Cool. Kathleen, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing. This has been super interesting to learn from you. If people want to learn more, where's the best place for them to go to?
Yeah, our website is ecomedes.com, and I'd be happy to take any emails from folks, Kathleen@ecomedes.com. And if you're an architect or a designer or a builder or even a manufacturer, the database, which you can access from our website, or you could just go direct, it's products.ecomedes.com. And if you're a lead consultant, you just got half your life back.
Love it. Kathleen, thank you so much for coming on the show. And
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody for listening. We'll catch y'all next week.